the 12th of December 2021. I hope everybody's doing good. Except for Thinker and Obsolete Optics. You can go fuck yourselves, the both of you. Everybody else, though, I hope you're doing good. And the nuclear industry, of course, you can drop dead. Sooner the better. You got a problem with that, you can call into the show. 709-589-4406. Let's bang about it. Well, originally the second last video showed you screen captures from 736 new pictures released this year of the Fukushima nuclear power plant site from the original days, from a drone flown quite high, but very high quality, where you're able to zoom in and recognize all the objects. And then the last video I showed you was a set of 1968, and this is part 2 of that. And we're starting now. There's a link directly to the photos if you don't want to listen to my squeaky voice. Unfortunately, unless you know this topic really well, it's hard to appreciate what you're looking at, but they're there for you in the description below. Okay, so the problem is the fuel pools at the top of the buildings. We're still waiting for Thinker and Obsolete Optics to call in. I'll leave my number there till you do. The fuel pools were at the top of the buildings, and double fuel pools with around 6 million pounds. And then the reactor cores, which are 800 tons. And Chernobyl was a 200-ton reactor, mostly graphite, which, interestingly, Sellafield was 4,000 tons. So Sellafield was 20 times the size of Chernobyl, and Sellafield is still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean, murdering people through contamination and destroying the ecosystem. And this planet has been sitting in silence for 80 years on that one. Santa Susana melted down, United States, is 460 fuel pools. 460 3-mile island equivalent of radiation released, and 3 Mile Island radiated over 2 million people. And so the problem is, for instance, with Fukushima, is they're claiming the pools are still there and the reactor cores were still there. To the left, which is Reactor 3. This was a mixed oxide fuel facility. What we're going to show you today is pictures, original pictures. Now, these weren't redacted, were released in February 2013. And I put links below directly to the site. You can download the pictures yourself. Unfortunately, the pictures I showed 2 videos ago from the drones, all redacted, those links are now gone. Those were Chinese links, and I can't find them anywhere else. And so nobody has those pictures on the internet, and same with what you're watching tonight, nobody has these pictures on the internet. Except for TEPCO, nobody has explained in the pictures ever. We're going to do that tonight. In fact, we're going to do that. Too sweet. We got a drone, a poll for everybody tonight. Is Japan and the nuclear industry out of control? We're still waiting for Thinker and Obsolete Optics to call in. 709-589-4406. Lines are open. And so the poll tonight is batshit lunatic Japan and the nuclear industry out of control. We have 18 votes with a 94% of people. We have to bring up the external computer. To bring up the external because it's quicker, easier to zoom in on these pictures. We do have another story we got to cover soon, tomorrow or something properly. Britain lifting post-Fukushima restrictions on Japan food imports. Now, Britain only had restrictions on 8 prefectures. 55 countries had restrictions on 14, all the northern prefectures. That's really bad news because so you just had America lift restrictions, the EU lift restrictions, Iceland and Norway are about to lift restrictions, and now United Kingdom. That's a significant part of the population of the planet that they're going to use to exterminate people with. Courage to the Fukushima 50. Let's go back a step. March the 18th. Okay. All right. March the 18th. Oh, so March the 18th is where our picture starts today. The number 15 set is 2 megabytes. And we're taken on the 19th. The same day. The day after Reactor 4 started melting down the fuel pools. And of course, you're talking about this is going to go on for a very long time. This is conditions around Unit 1 and 4. Reactor buildings 1 and 4. Now, so they didn't clear this. This is cleared. See that? That couldn't have been done on the 19th. There's lethal doses of radiation everywhere. And so this is long after, but that's the official narrative, is that these were the 19th. So there was supposed to be a lot of people there working, trying to restore power to buildings that didn't exist. Restore power to buildings that didn't exist. For instance, that's Reactor 3. That's what that looked like on the 19th. That's a mixed oxide fuel building. It's not easy doing all of this, trust me. So this is set 15 of 99 folders. And you expect a lot of the pictures to be blurry and degraded, multiple. Again, you're seeing everything. Whenever you see clean roads like this, they've removed the debris from these little areas and they clear the path. The only way you're going to do that is sacrificing people. You've got multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns. And you see this over and over and over. So these pictures are obviously not what they're claiming. And this particular set is pretty blurry, eh? But you can see they got paths cleared. And this is daytime on the 19th. And this is conditions around Reactor 1 to 4, but these are down by the seaside. So there's a pump house in between that. You can see fire hoses. Now the military, the Japanese Special Forces, were brought in. This is Reactor 3. They're attempting... Now what you see that line there is water. That's a spray of water. And they're on the other side of the pump house. Or they're on the back side. And that's Reactor 3. So they're on the seaside of the pump house. They got the fire trucks there. There is, in some of these pictures, people walking or standing up. So again, you can see the water. Now you need 4,500 tons a minute. These pumps can do 300 tons a day. And shooting straight up. Very grainy nighttime pictures with a digital camera. So 10 years ago, actually, digital cameras weren't very good compared to what we take for granted today. Like our cell phones today are amazing pictures, take amazing, incredible, high quality pictures. There would be high radiation numbers in this area from several days of emissions from detonations of reactors had thrown assemblies right in this entire area. These are not nuclear scientists or nuclear engineer or nuclear academics. I'm just going to flick through these pictures because they're just... So that is Reactor 3 for sure. And that is Reactor 3 at the same time. They're on the other side of the pump house shooting water at this. And the idea is to trick the population of the planet into thinking the integrity of the building is there and that the building would still look symmetrically like this, and that both of those fuel pools with over 12 million pounds capacity, and because you don't have a repository anywhere in Japan, they would have been stuffed. 800-ton pure uranium plutonium, but it is mixed oxide fuel for a reactor core. Mixed oxide fuel is where they reclaimed this material from the nuclear bombs have already gone through a chain reaction. You're not supposed to put it through a chain reaction again. You have to have special reactors and modifications to burn. What you can't destroy the material. You're just going to release a lot of it into the community rather than try to store it for 1 billion years. And so this is what the nuclear industry has been up to. Terrifying disregard for all species on the planet. So you can only deliver 300, I'm sorry. Gotta go back now. A dozen pictures. That's the problem with big setups, right? So they're spraying water at 300 tons a day. You need 4,500 tons a minute, every minute, 1,440 minutes a day. So this is all about show and tell. There could be trying to extinguish some fires, but there's so much heat there the water can't actually reach the buildings. And the people that are spraying this on the other side of the pump house, trying to get shelter from neutron bursts and gamma shines and x-rays and everything else, lethal doses everywhere you look. It's absurd. It's a sacrifice and a waste of life to send people into this kind of harm. Certainly they're not nuclear scientists or nuclear academics or anybody else that is actually trained in this stuff. And so the smog could very well be emissions. Well, it looks like fog. That could very well be emissions. That's Reactor 4, and this is that's Reactor 2. This is Reactor 1. So they're up by the administration office to get that particular picture, which is on a plateau half the height of the building or more. The buildings are 190 feet high. And those towers in the background up here, you can't, even today, you can't get near those towers because there's so much radiation. But they want you to believe they're fixing their reactors. It's a disgusting industry. It's a coward, stalking industry on top of it. Uh, so this is the pump, number 6 pump. The water well coming into the plant to grate before it gets to the... It got to go inside the building to be hit the pumps. The pumps are actually inside. These are the gates for the ocean. That's number 6. And they're showing some debris down there, but that's... Remember, these pumping stations kill around 3 billion fish a year because they get caught up in these gates against the separators. And we know this from Indian Point down by New York studies. These are mass marine life genocide machines. Again, number 6. These fleeting pictures, all of these in particular seem to be distorted, but most of the pictures are pretty good. You can see debris. This is down by the ocean, obviously. Debris is everywhere. And we're talking huge pieces of rebar twisted up. Stripped the pavement off the roads down there. There's a prime picture. So the pump trucks we were looking at earlier they're further this way, but they're up behind these pump houses. Number 5 pump for number 5 reactor, I'm assuming. Yeah, the gates for the water intake. They need 1 million gallons per minute for each reactor. And if you don't get that, she melts down. After about an hour, they start melting down. Shortly after that, there's no way to rein it in. Even originally, once it melts down, it's melting down. But if you can restore water, you can deal with it with moderator and get rid of the chain reaction. When you lose the stability to add a moderator, like boron, you can see now that damage is caused by atmospheric pressure, where the ocean is so high, there's pressure on the entire tank, and then the tank collapses at its weakest point symmetrically around the entire plant. All the windows and all the storage are gone from that building. These are huge sites, by the way. They need their own power plant to operate these sites, and then they need another one on standby. These 2 power plants are cold oil or gas power plants. And so when they try to convince you, we're all the way up to 18 right now. Let's go down and check what 18 is all about. 18 was taken on the 20th. Conditions inside, and we looked at conditions of the area to seaside of Unit 5 and 6. I was showing you those pumps, right, just now. Water discharges in the Unit 3, I showed you before that. And conditions around Unit 1 is what we started off with. So right now we're at 18, the 5th picture in the set. Conditions inside the power station site. And 19 is supposed to be Reactor 4, but that is Reactor 4 right there, what's left of it. Now, when you look at this building, that's a 190-foot building, 150 feet wide. But it's designed for a nuclear power site, but it's a 19-story building. And so when you look at the damage, you can see the damage down pretty close to the ground. But when you actually look at the damage, those pylon supports, you can actually turn an SUV around on the supports, on those beams. And so they're actually huge beams that give you some scale. And so even today they're pretending they got all the fuel out of the reactor pools, which would have been at the very top of the building. It's a despicable industry, a hateful industry. Incredible amount of contempt in this industry. This is the back side of Reactor 4. These are very unusual pictures. Whoever took these pictures would have got fatal doses. They would have died that day or that week. And so the tendency to use homeless people and victims of society and probably offer them an extra $200 for a day's work but never told them it was a nuclear meltdown. All you got to do is keep pushing the button. And if they dropped dead, then they knew not to go in those areas. And there was lots of that happening. It was a total destruction of 680 kilometers of the coastline. Ripped out all the telephone poles, all the infrastructures, ripped away communities. And so when you see these clean streets, in order to accomplish that, that would have took several weeks before they got to that point. So these pictures can't possibly be from the dates they're claiming. And the fact that they're from TEPCO means you absolutely unequivocally can't trust what they're claiming. You can't trust anything this corporation, which was nationalized by the Japanese government because they went bankrupt and were on the stock market. The government took it over. So even worse goblins. Government is basically inbreeds of inbreeds of inbreeds over a generation working in a public job. They're the worst people imaginable for the job on top of that. They're not really people on top of that. And so these pictures, you won't find them anywhere else. You'll find them right here. And I got the link below for you to TEPCO. But you won't find anybody else really talking about these pictures or trying to help you understand what the pictures are or where they are. We're still on 18, set 18, which is generally just pictures around the site. They were supposed to be taken on the 20th, which is 9 days after the nuclear meltdown. 9 days after the tsunami. And meltdowns happen in increments over several days. So this is the first week. There's zero possibilities because there's so much radiation on the site. It's probably zero possibilities that any of these guys live very long. And they're getting fuel out of a drum that was brought in, I would imagine, by the military to put in, I'm assuming, their vehicle. And on the other side of that hill is the reactors. You see the tsunami damage. Wearing paper suits at a nuclear meltdown. We're still on 18, set 18, folder 18. And no explanations, only just folder by folder. Got a landslide here. There's an absurd amount of disinformation. There's been an absurd amount of disinformation. Now, so this is the 18th or the 19th. The helicopters can't drop water on the reactors but there's supposed to be people there working. Let's watch that. It's not very long.
Good evening. This is NHK's Newswatch 9 for Friday, May 20th. On the seventh day after the March 11th quake, self-defense forces sprayed water on the nuclear power reactor in Fukushima. The images were broadcast throughout the world. The Fukushima Daiichi plant was no longer able to cool down its reactors and was facing a potential meltdown. Today we talked with the actual crew that was working to cool the plant. It's the first time details of the operation are being released to the public. J Village is the base for workers trying to restore the power plant. On May 3rd, during the holidays, the self-defense forces that engaged in the water spraying operation completed their mission in Fukushima and withdrew. An SDF representative says the nuclear power plant mission is still unfinished and will continue. He thinks.
But what was going on is they couldn't actually get water to go on it. They had to walk away. You notice how high the helicopter is? Yeah, it dropped its... Now, in Chernobyl, all 600 of the helicopter pilots died. Within the first couple of weeks, by the way. Most don't know, but Reactor 1 melted down in 5 hours. We almost lost 1/3 of the nation due to Fukushima. That's an incredible statement, right? If your coal plant breaks down, do you expect to lose 1/3 of your country? If your gas plant breaks down, do you expect to lose 1/3 of your country? Or if your oil plant breaks down, do you expect to lose 1/3 of your country? You know, like lose it. Massive amounts of radioactive substances were released. Explosions may have occurred inside the vessels of Fukushima Unit 1, which can generate missiles that endanger containment integrity. These are 1,800-pound assemblies of fuel rods that are turned into projectiles. Now, what happens is when these buildings, these reactors get 30 or 40 years old, it's unique what happens at a reactor, the neutron, gamma shines, x-rays, and everything else. The metal of the containments in that become very brittle, extremely brittle after just a couple of years. After 30 or 40 years, and these were very old reactors, almost 40 years, the containment and all the infrastructure, what's known as brittle, has lost its integrity completely. It's very fragile. And so when you have detonations that were felt 25 miles away, it's not hard to infer that the metal itself was compromised. I'm being polite by saying that. But it's not very difficult to wrap your mind around that. These pictures don't exist anywhere else in conversation format, just at the link below. Renewed nuclear chain reaction feared at the spent fuel storage pool. Reactor number 4 was under maintenance, which meant they were taking some fuel out of the reactor core. But when they change the fuel, they don't take all the fuel out. So this was March the 20th, 2011. It's the same date as the pictures we're going to go right back to immediately that we're talking about, that there was a renewed chain reaction at the spent fuel pools. Let's come back over to that. If that's possible. This is just, we're still at set 18, and they were taken on the 20th, where there was chain reactions. So these pictures are absolutely unequivocally not the dates they're claiming, but let's play their game, I suppose. Divide and conquer. That's what the industry likes to do. And it doesn't care how long it takes to set it up. It'll do it in increments over years if that's what it takes. To trick you and deceive you. That's how they work. So that's down in front of the pump house itself, close to the ocean. And you can see there's nothing, everything is out of proportion. Very faded pictures, eh? Still see cars up there. All these cars were piled up way up there, right? So again, the water came way up to here, which is a long way up from the ocean. Yeah, you know, wearing a Tyvek paper suit. Well, you get two choices if you're lucky, extremely lucky. It's Tyvek or paper. If you're homeless, there's two people stood up there, by the way. If you're homeless, you get paper suits. So this is right by Reactor 4. And to me, that looks like a person stood up right there. What they were trying to do apparently was scout out a place where they can put the pump trucks. So this is set 19. And this is the first picture in set 19. Conditions of the area near Unit 4. This was the 21st. There was still a chain reaction going on here. And so whoever that is, they sent in there in oilskins, fishing gear, not containment suits with Scotty backpacks. Right? They only go to, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not going to go here. The IAEA is not going to be in that picture. And if they were, they'd be wearing a full containment suit with a pressurized suit and a Scotty backpack. And the homeless would be walking ahead of them, because if they drop, then the IAEA can run away. So whoever that was, they would have died that day, most likely. If that was actually shot on the 20th, for instance, they would have died that day, for sure. But these pictures weren't shot on the 20th, but they still probably died that week from being in that position. This is what the industry does. It gets a bunch of homeless people, dresses them up in fisherman gear, and send them into the nuclear wasteland. If they drop dead, then they know not to go in that areas. I know that might sound incredible to some people, but it's not. These buildings just lost 4 decades of reactor cores all around the spot right here. And also, that could be photoshopped in there, right? There it is again. That could actually be a Photoshop because it's so blurry. So is everything else, so it could be real. But this looks like 2 people, see? But that's typical of what they would do is they would, I don't see the reflection in the water. That don't mean much, I suppose, but you would expect to see from that distance their reflection there. It would stand out because they're yellow, right? That's by Reactor 4, so that's a lethal dose to go into that area. Right, see, because that's supposed to be 2 people by the looks of it. But it doesn't look like it's real to me. And I say that because I hope it's not real. Because if it's real, then they would have died that day. I don't know. But again, we're seeing what looks like 2 people. And so this is total destruction all around them, from what we can see. Utter destruction, eh? The whole site. I know people are out there telling people there's only like 10 or 12 inches of water ran through here. So you see the damage right here and the damage up here at the bottom of the building. This is actually 190 feet high. They're 150 feet wide is what you're looking at. And so damage is quite low. And the reactor cores and the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. They're at the very upper part of the buildings. There's nothing left there whatsoever. All the infrastructure there is blown right out of the building. There's no doors left. There's no cupboards left. There's nothing left there whatsoever. Again, we're left with these weird pictures. Each of these pictures, the people that are allegedly we're looking at, they always look the same, eh? Which is typical what you expect from bad Photoshop, right? I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying there's a high probability because TEPCO's been caught at it repeatedly, especially with Reactor 4. Now this picture, you got two separate people, three separate people. Look at that. One behind me in the white. Which, if you're there dressed like that, you're an idiot. And he's huge compared to these other two. These other two are little tiny people, midgets, compared to that guy. That's Photoshop, for sure. First off, because that's a lethal dose to be right there. And these pictures are taken by a telephoto lens. This is the very end of the zoom. So you can actually see right through that person. See that? That's really bad Photoshop there. I can't make that any bigger. Yeah, no, I can't make it. But you can actually see right through this person. Look at that. That's Photoshop. For sure. Zooming in doesn't make people transparent. So that's Photoshop. And he's looking Photoshopped. But they're two midgets compared to this guy. And all he's got on is overalls with a face mask and a hood on, or a helmet on, at a nuclear meltdown. None of that adds up. And this is set 19, number 12. There's links below to these pictures. You can go look at them yourself. All the crazies are out. Again, you see a discrepancy in sizes. And so what would you be looking for over there at a nuclear meltdown? Somebody lose their wallet or something? Like seriously, what are you going to be looking for over there? At a nuclear meltdown, it's the very last spot on the planet you want to stand up. All the crazies are out. The nuclear industry is lunatic anyway. Why would you wander? Look at this guy allegedly here, see? Why would you wander through this kind of debris right alongside of reactors that have melted down and blown up? There's no need. You wouldn't be there. You would take a picture and you would send that to the nuclear engineers to analyze it, but you wouldn't be in there wandering around. If you were a nuclear expert who knew what you were looking at, there's zero possibilities you're going to be stood up there. Zero. Because you're not going to live to tell the story, for starters. So it's either homeless or Photoshop. There's nothing to be gleaned from standing up there. you're supposed to be everywhere but there. You don't go hanging out at a nuclear meltdown because you're first on the scene. And just a incredible mess. That's number 19. And like, they didn't try to recover any bodies for at least 6 weeks. We got the emissions of that from redacted emails, around 4 million emails, official emails, correspondence between regulatory commissions, International Atomic Energy Agency, TEPCO, Hitachi, blah, 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 blah. And I got to get a link and put that there for everybody, I suppose. They're worth looking at. In fact, we got to start doing. Now, this is reactor 4, a different side of it. So all 4 sides you see damage very low, which means there was nothing intact on the buildings. Well, that's real. That's what it means to be a sucker. You go to work at this place after it blows up. That's where they should send all the nuclear students and nuclear scientists to. Yeah, amazing damage from the tsunami at this site on top of that. And then the reactors blew up. You had 2,000 square miles of Japan ripped off the coast. You had a chunk the size of Texas out in the Pacific, 2,000 square miles of Japan washed away. And why would you stand up there with your hands out? So theoretically, right, they did scout for a spot to put the trucks to pump water into the building, right? They brought in the world's biggest cement trucks from Russia and the world's biggest planes. And the idea was he was going to pump water into the fuel pools so the fuel pools wouldn't melt down. But the fuel pools were lost immediately. And so the trucks were brought in as a deception, to hoodwink, gaslight the entire planet. Which is, some of these pictures are real. And it'd be, you hire a couple of people who don't know nothing about nuclear, and you get them to walk in there and get their picture taken while the reactors are still hemorrhaging emissions, right? Welcome to Looney Tune land. So these reactors, constant emissions, are now responsible for a catalyst, or not a catalyst, of an extinction event plaguing our planet. So we're still on 19, by the way. So there has to be 4 people there is what they're claiming. 3 of them and the guy holding the camera. His minimum supposed to be 4. So like it does look like they're marking a spot to bring in the pump truck, because this is where they put the pump truck. But on the flip side, you had pictures where you could see right through people, which is Photoshop, right? You see the damage? It's amazing damage And they're pretending that didn't happen. Arnie Gunnarsson, Helen Callercott, Christopher Busby, and nothing is beyond these critters. So that's the 19th. That's supposed to be March the 20th, 9 days after the tsunami. And there's nothing you can do. The buildings are destroyed. There is nothing you can do. Right? There's nothing you can do. You have to... All he done was created a cover story. The original story is they didn't melt down. In fact, it was several years before they admitted that they melted down. It was a very long time. We never had anybody in the first couple of years actually come out and tell you what building was what. And so you would normally get an angle where you couldn't see the four. This is reactor 3. Well, it was. And it's right alongside of reactor 2 that liquefied and went China syndrome straight down into the earth. This is up by the administration office. And reactor 3 is right by reactor 4. Reactor 4 was still heavy emissions. Reactor 3 is still heavy emissions. So what are people down there doing down there wandering around? And how did they survive more than a day or two after? Those people we seen most likely would have died that day. Anybody coming in contact with this stuff dies immediately. So this stuff leaves the building and some of it falls right down to the ground. That's a lethal dose immediately. It's going to drift all over the place, including reactor 4, which is right alongside of it. This is huge emissions. This is allegedly March the 20th. Smoke coming out of the Unit 3 reactor. Photos were taken on the 21st of March. This is what's left of reactor 3. This has gone China syndrome. This is horrifying pictures, by the way. The top of a 190-foot building. Reactor 3 is right there in the corner. That's reactor 1. Reactor 2 and reactor 3 is up behind me. So now they're clearing out a spot where you see the people stood up. They have 2 tractors. They have an excavator and a backhoe. Clearing a spot. This is where they're going to bring in the pump truck for the big deception. The pump truck is going to reach up to the top of the building up here, stick its nozzle in there, and try to put out any fires. The official story was they're going to keep water in the fuel pool. But the fuel pool obviously doesn't exist in this building at this point. And so these emissions, being right where this spot right here, that's a lethal dose anywhere right here. So that would have been homeless people we seen earlier. This is lunatic. This is reactor 3 again. Again, now they got the spot cleared out. And they got somebody who don't know any better walking in there. And I'm pretty sure this is where they're going to put the pump truck. And they got steel sheets laid down. See these steel sheets? That's to keep the radiation. Fuel pellets are buried in the ground there or pushed into the ground. So they laid the whole area with steel plates. And that's where they're going to put a pump truck. And so the debris they pushed back would have been all lethal doses. They would have been remote controlled. They would have had to send somebody in with a Geiger counter. So these emissions are going to fall down to the ground on top of that. That's a lethal dose there, for sure. So you would have had all kinds of fuel pellets and everything else in that. Lethal doses everywhere. So this is a cement truck for pumping cement. And they're going to use it to pump water into the top of the building. And they're going to tell the world that they got it under control, right? There it is. Here we go. So now they cleared out a spot. They pushed the truck in there. They hooked the water up and then they ran away. Now see the nozzle at the very top up there? It's going to pump water randomly in the top of the building. And it's going to try to put out any fires that is in there. But they're using salt water, and salt water can cause a criticality, a new chain reaction. These are incredible pictures. The whole story is madness when you think about it. Number 22. We're at 2207. We already done 21. So 22 is preparation for water discharge in the Unit 4 reactor building. And 23 is conditions in the seaside area, Unit 1 and 4 is the next set. This set was taken on the 22nd of March, which is 11 days after the tsunami. They were finally spraying some water in. So the water's going to go in, it's going to hit the absurdly hot reactor cores that are melting down. That becomes extremely radioactive water, and that boils off and comes back out the building as emissions. In the right conditions, you'll see it, it'll look like fog. And major damage, this is down by the ocean. You're looking at the pump house, number 4 pump house. Number 4, you can see the roof of it in the background there. The first part is the pump house building itself on the ocean side. Yeah, just another day at a nuclear meltdown. Everything's good. I'll be home for supper, honey. After we burn our paper suits. No nuclear scientist, no nuclear engineer, because they won't dress like that, I can guarantee it. First off, they'll claw the eyes out of you when they realize they're going in a nuclear power plant. They'll literally rip the head off whoever is driving the vehicle, throw them out the door and drive away screaming. That's what a nuclear scientist would do there. You have zero possibilities of getting a nuclear scientist to go there. We're like, no, please, please. And they'll be panicking. They'll literally chew their hand off to get out of this. There's zero possibility they're going there. Unfortunately, nuclear scientists are not humans. They're some weird alien race. They look like humans. They talk and sound like humans. They don't act like humans or anything like that. But by appearances, they look like humans. But they don't have any of the attributes of humans. They have this incredible contempt for all species on this planet. It's not contempt, really, it's hate. It's a hatred for all species. That's the seaside. So we're in set 23 now. 23. 2 parts to 23. Conditions on the seaside area of reactor 1 and 4. And these photos were taken on March 22nd. These reactors are still full-blown, ongoing nuclear meltdown. The whole area now sprayed with pellets. Truly hellish. These are what they consider disposable people. They'll die shortly after. Yeah, just wandering around nuclear wasteland. Another day on the job. Get me pokey. The pumps right down on the shoreline. They pump 1 million gallons a minute into each reactor. Typically, a glass of water would have 1 billion creatures. 75 to 100 million of them are phytoplankton. The base is the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. So these reactors boil off 16 million times 1 billion creatures. 16 million billion creatures every minute for each reactor, and 440 reactors worldwide every minute of every day for decades. The pump houses kills millions and billions of fish for each reactor each year, and turtles and seals and everything else, and sturgeons. These are death factories. Then when they melt down, their emissions are disease factories, I guess, disease machines for millions of years. And nobody's trying to stop these reactors. They're trying to stop you from understanding the story, stop you from understanding how dangerous it is to eat the food there. Fukushima reactor site engulfed by steam, or something like steam. It's coming up from the ground, continuously wafting through the air. Work to remove the rubble is suspended. These are lethal doses we're talking about coming out of the ground at around 10 sieverts, which is what the Geiger counters they were using were capable of measuring. These were stationary Geiger counters. And this is why work to remove rubble is suspended. And you can imagine who was doing that work. It's not nuclear corporations or nuclear academics or nuclear professors or universities or students, but victims of society. Leaked TEPCO report 120 billion becquerels of plutonium, 7.6 trillion becquerels of neptunium released in the first 100 hours. Which is like 2 grams. Because that's, there was tens of millions of pounds released, not 2 grams, by the way. It's an invisible snowstorm that covers the entire planet with radioactive fallout. It looks something like this. This is one of the models 20 days after. Now, if the model went to 40 days, the whole depiction is covered in radioactive fallout. And this one is of Xenon-133. TEPCO confirmed steam came up from underground in reactor number 1 at 4.7 sieverts an hour, was 20% more than in June. These are lethal doses immediately. That would have been going on from day one. This is published October the 17th, 2011. So how we doing on our poll tonight? We got a poll for everybody. Is Japan and the nuclear industry out of control? We got 92% that says yes, Japan and the nuclear industry is out of control. I gotta agree with them. Japan is 100% out of control. So Britain's about to open up their food import from a nuclear wasteland. From a nuclear wasteland. Again, we're down by the seaside. Down by the seaside. And this is on the 21st. It's number 23. Double check for you. On the 21st, 22nd. The seaside area, Unit 1 and 4. Pumping water into an empty building to trick you into believing that they got it under control. This is madness. Don't ask me. I'm not even sure what the hell that is anymore. I used to know. This is salt water that's pumping up from the ocean. The reactors need 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks every minute. Each reactor building does. Or it melts down, catches fire, blows up, and catches fire, melts down. And that's it. Once that happens, it's game over. If you spray salt water on it, it's only going to happen quicker. And the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs that you're creating, because as you spray salt water on it, that's atomized and aerosol, ionized and radiated, and it creates this weird, bizarre buckyball type effect. And these buckyballs from sulfur are able to ingest or accept, is a better word, I suppose, plutonium or uranium or americium or neptunium, these hot particles. And now it's a super hot particle, and it's very mobile. It doesn't need the jet streams to cross the oceans or anything. And it's easily liberated back into the environment until somebody or something ingests it or sequesters it. Then it turns into a disease factory after that. There's 24, so this is down on the shoreline at nighttime, obviously. I got no idea specifically what we're looking at. But it's the shoreline, must be the pump house, which was full of radioactive water that they eventually claim was recycled and sprayed back on the reactors. Which is like literally the stupidest thing you could do. Instead of storing it for 1,000,000 years. It took them 7 years to get back into the control rooms. 7 years. But in 3 years, they were back, allegedly take fuel out of the reactor building, which didn't even exist. But it took them 7 years to get back into these control rooms. Hello, can anybody hear me? TEPCO, are you there? It's Reactor 1. That's part of Reactor 2 right behind me. That's Reactor 1. That was a major detonation. Now today, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, this captured regulator in Japan, has put out a video claiming they're inside of Reactor 1. They've done that before, by the way, at Reactor 3. There's no way you're going into buildings. You don't come out of it if you go in there. And that's Reactor 3. We call it Medusa, because you get that close, you get a fatal dose. That's a fatal dose being anywhere along here. And with the equipment they're wearing, they're going to die that day or that week for sure. It's just horrific. The whole story is still, it's still a nightmare for the next 10,000 years. And Japan, of course, is, you know, it had 50 plus nuclear reactors. So that's a lot of people working directly at the nuclear power plants. And then you have this whole chain of people. It's a huge industry there. There's 1 million companies dependent upon the nuclear industry for a living on top of that. You have the stock markets, you have the military, you have all the hospitals on top of that. So there's the mining companies, the processing companies, the waste management companies, the Department of Energy. The list is very long. Very influential corporations. And they'll murder everybody to keep the paycheck coming in. They'll murder everybody. None of them are accountable on top of that. You can't put any of them in jail. So there's no incentive not to be insidiously evil. Quite the opposite, actually. There's a lot of incentive to be evil. This is what's remaining of Reactor 4. A horrible spot to get a picture, man. That's not a spot where you want to get a selfie. I can guarantee you. And we're at number 28. Number 28. Utter and complete destruction. All the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. Yeah, it's 28. Conditions around Unit 1, an essential radioactive waste treatment facility, which is right by the incinerator too, by the way. Because all nuclear power plants have incinerators. Are licensed to poison you. That's what an incinerator is at these facilities. I think that's stunning. I mean, this is basically a public relation campaign is the reason the truck is there. There is a legitimate reason to have it there, is to pump some water in there, but they're using salt water. And the industry knows salt water is going to make it worse. Not like they got a choice either, right? The helicopters couldn't spray water on it. What does that tell you? And this is not bore-rated fresh water, this is salt water. And fresh water is demineralized water. Remember, $28.20. It's a backhoe or so tangled up. That would be like one of these, right? At the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. Again, it's a show and tell, pretending they got it under control with a handful of people in a massive site. So radiation toxicity, nuclear radiation is 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Try wrapping your mind around that one. That's the back end of a transport truck, obviously. Dana. So there's a lot of force generated here for an extended period of time. Yeah, that's reactor 4 at the very top up there. Right there, that's the top part of reactor 4 emitting radiation. 28. My heart goes out to all the people I see in these pictures. My heart's broken for all the people I see in the pictures. And so, who should speak up for all the victims? Should it be obsolete optics and thinker? Maybe we should get them to do all the speaking. They wouldn't even call into the show. And they waited 2 months before they complained after I blocked them for being monsters. So now they're back to try to divide, and they're really good at doing stuff like that. And there's a lot of people willing to help them because the truth don't matter. Ghost counts matter. I don't hide away from anybody because I don't got nothing to hide. I work really hard every day. I put a lot of work in to tell the stories, to articulate it, and to present it properly. I've been at it for a very long time. I've seen thousands of trolls, nuclear industry trolls in that time, disrupting what I'm trying to do. And I still haven't lost faith in humanity in all that time. I did lose some patience, though. Because I'm trying to do something good. And they're trying to disrupt that. And that's what makes them feel good. Is that if everybody's evil, then they look normal. I don't think that way. So we're up to number 30. Number 30, which is where we're going to pick up next time. Number 30. Conditions around Unit 3 and 4 on the 23rd is where we'll be picking up next time. Where we will pick up the next time. The two of us. So 4.7 sieverts per hour coming out of the ground is huge numbers. These are huge, incredible numbers. And let me fix this bottom here. If I don't do it now, I'll screw up, right? Number 30. It's right there. Yeah, what have we got done here? We've gotten through 600 pictures and 2 shows. That's pretty good, isn't it? I gotta get... We just had a big storm blow through, and the boat tarp is 3 years old, and it's disintegrating on me. In just the first couple of days, I got 5 great big holes that are just... obviously, it's lost its integrity. They're like a good tarp is like, these are big tarps, right, for the boat. They're about 110, but the one I should be using is about 150. And then you got to drive to St. John's to get it in the Princess Auto, which is another $50 worth of fuel to drive to the city and back before the next snowfall starts. I just worked like a dog on Friday to get that thing on the boat because of the snowstorm. It was coming in on Saturday. And we had huge winds the weekend. And that thing is out there now. The whole top of it's shredded. And there's no way to salvage it because it's a tarp. After a few years, they deteriorate. In the summertime, it keeps the tarp inside under shelter, right? Still deteriorated, though. It's unusable. I figured I'd get the winter out of it, but I was wrong. That's all. That's life, right? Unfortunately, that's my life. I'm at this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the casuals don't know any better. And if we don't try to educate those who want to know, what's the point? Peaceware, James Lucid, Emma Oliver, what the hell am I looking at here? Everybody had a good weekend so far. I've been sick all weekend. I haven't stopped, but Patrick, Ella, good night, everybody. Loriani served one king. Port Angeles. How's our poll tonight? Gonna stop our poll here now. Our poll is Japan and the nuclear industry under control. We got 93% of the people says Japan and the nuclear industry is out of control. Port Angeles. Good night, everyone. Kevin Blanche. Laura. Hi, Laura. Furch. Kevin Blanche is down walking the tide zones again in California, I guess. And year after year now, they're empty. Completely empty down there. It's terrifying, eh? Tim Norris. Hello, everybody. Mike Mansfield. Dana Nasana. Nirad Yeloft. Oh my God. Another hellish day for me. See everybody tomorrow night, hopefully. We got through almost 600 pictures. And we wouldn't have to do them again if the nuclear industry didn't take down my site a few months ago. Which is like 4 months now, isn't it? We have an extinction event playing out on the planet from the radioactive fallout from Japan now is exterminating all the species. And for 10 years we watched this industry do everything it can to kill the planet. Well, 75 years really, isn't it? And so many people make light of this, I don't understand it. And they're going to try every trick in the book to keep us divided. And they're going to work really hard to divide you and turn you against people like me. And they're very good at it. God bless and hugs for everybody. Have a great night, everyone. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.